We all love Selkie gowns. They're floofy, frilly, fabulous frocks with puffy sleeves perfect for frolicking in a field of flowers. But there's one other F word I'd use to describe these gowns, and it's the one that comes out of your mouth when you look at the price tag. That's not to say that they're overpriced, and I'm absolutely not throwing shade on these gowns. I love them so much. But what do you do if you don't have that kind of expendable income and want to have clothes with that choice cottagecore vibe? Well, if you're anything like me, and I'm guessing you are, you probably see gorgeous fabric at the store all the time, and you buy it anyway even though you don't have a specific project for it, and you take it home and you pet it for a while, and then it sits in a pile in your stash in your mind for the next 15 years because you want to use it but you can't think of anything to use it for. Well, we're gonna use it today, people. Because using what you have instead of buying more crap is just as, and even more environmentally friendly than patronizing slow fashion brands. Anatomy of a Selkie gown. Super floofy skirt, fitted low-cut bodice with poofy sleeves galore. This thing is screaming 17th century, y'all. So we're going to use a 360-year-old extant garment as a pattern for our Selkie gown. I have 2.5 yards of 45-inch eyelet lace to use for the skirt, and 2 meters of blue gingham stripe for the bodice. Yes, this really is 15 years old. I bought it in London in 2009, and my friends across the pond will probably recognize it as Calf Kitston. Since I don't have quite enough yardage to get a 17th century petticoat out of this fabric, we're gonna make a basic A-line skirt with some 17th century styling. And then we'll use the 1660s bodice pattern from Patterns of Fashion 5 to make the top. This isn't gonna be quite as floofy and over the top as a real Selkie gown because we're using what we have, but it's still gonna give that vibe. This cotton is pretty darn see-through, so I decided to flatline it with some plain white muslin I had on hand. Now, the great thing about this fabric is that it's finished on the bottom, so no need to hem. If you wanted to make a super fast skirt, you could just zip this up the center back, fold the top selvage over, and sew a channel, then schlep some elastic inside and call it a day. But I've got plenty of time and I want to do pockets, so we're going to do the slightly more complicated but still easy method. First, hem the bottom of the lining. Muslin is a little flimsy, so I grabbed some fusible interfacing I had handy to stabilize the waistband. Fun fact, I have an entire bolt of this under my sewing table. Who knew? Flatline the skirt with the lining and then run 2 sets of gathering stitches along the top of the back piece, but not the front. Match your centers and gather to fit the waistband. Note that this waistband is larger than half of my waist, but smaller than the width of the back half of the fabric. This will allow me to make the back adjustable, but still maintain an even gather, which is a little more flattering on those of us who have junk in the trunk. The front is going to get the Baroque treatment, partially because of the aesthetic and partially because I think a smooth waistband is, again, more flattering on my figure. 17th century petticoats have a very distinctive look. There's a wide box pleat in the center, 4 inches here, with a few knife pleats radiating out from that. This complements the long center point of the bodies that go on top. The rest of the front will be cartridge pleated down to the waistband. Note that I'm at least half a yard short of having enough skirt fabric to do this properly, so it won't be quite as full as I'd like, but it'll do pig. Remember, we're using what we have here. So you'll want to make 2 sets of gathering stitches every ½ inch. I say it all the time, but clear quilting rulers make this so much easier. Here's the front waistband sewn on along with my pockets. It's not traditional to sew the waistband on before you sew the side seams, but I'm doing this intentionally. We're going to sew this piece of elastic right here on the side of the skirt, but not on the other side. For now, we're just gonna let it float free to make our lives just a little easier. Once the side seams are sewn, turn the waistband over and pin it to the seam allowance of the skirt. Capture the elastic inside, making sure to pin it above the sew line so it doesn't get caught by your thread. When you reach the end of the elastic, stick a safety pin on the end and then continue to pin the waistband over the seam allowance until you reach the other side. If we'd sewn the other edge of the elastic to the other side seam, it would have made hand sewing this waistband down a pain in the butt. Make sure you leave yourself a little bit of open waistband so you can pull the elastic through later. Here's the waistband sewn down. Pull the elastic through, pin the elastic to the other side seam and secure it on the machine, then hand sew the rest of the waistband down. Okie dokie, here we've got the skirt. Nice, flat, flattering front. Nice stretchy waistband in the back. Pockets! I told you it'd be easy. All right, it's good that the skirt was easy because now we get to figure out the bodice. Here's the extant garment pattern digitally enlarged to fit my waist measurement. The sleeve has 2 pieces. Then we've got the center back, shoulder strap, this weird sleeve bit, this equally weird side and side back piece, and the center front. The side overlaps the side back and sort of covers up the tabs, as you can see here. So for the sake of ease, I decided to tape these 2 pieces together. I'll talk about why that was done when we make the real gown. I am going to buy just a couple of things to make my life easier and make this gown a little bit more wearable. Since this is a history-bounding bodice, I bought a zipper. I got some coral pink ribbon to edge the top because pastels really aren't great for my skin tone. And I got some white grosgrain ribbon so that I had something to use for the lacing that wasn't gonna be Slippy McSlipperson. Total cost? Just under $4. Not bad. First fitting, not bad. A little too big, but otherwise nothing too wacky. Which is as refreshing as cool lemonade on a hot day. Without too many alterations, I think we're ready to do the next mock-up with boning. It was too big. Quite a bit too big. My lacing strips were meeting together completely in the back, and y'all know that I like to have at least 2 inches of room in the back to accommodate for size adjustments. So I went ahead and I took it in 3/4 of an inch, specifically on this side seam here, because I was getting some gaping, and you can still probably see that it's gaping a little bit under the arm. That seemed to have worked. These still need to be fixed, but we're gonna worry about that later. Without too much modification, I think I've got it to a point where I'm ready to split the 2 bodices. The only change I've made is to take in the center back 1 inch on each side. It's still a little too small at the top, although I'm getting an okay gap down here. I definitely will need to take it in at the top here. I'm definitely gonna have to modify the shoulders, but I think I'm going to do those on the individual bodices because they are going to change so much that I think that's gonna be the smarter way to do it. Whew. You know what? I was gonna say something, but I'm gonna jinx myself if it comes out of my mouth, so let's move on. I traced the pattern out onto fresh paper. The original gown is off the shoulder, but since this is a history-bounding look, I wanted it to be over the shoulder so I could wear normal undergarments. After making the adjustments with my mock-up, I traced the change onto the paper and added seam allowances. This also meant I needed to take it in at the center front. This change also meant that I needed to take it in at the center back by several inches. It's the moment we've all been waiting for. You've only been waiting a couple of minutes, but I have been waiting 15 years for this. All right, let's cut this bitch. The side pieces are a little more complicated because I'm going to put in a side zip. Yes, I know. I hate laying in zippers too, but I learned the hard way that I do not faff about with lacing things first thing in the morning before I've had any coffee. So I laid the side destined for zippage on the wrong side of the fabric. We need to add seam allowances to this, so I went ahead and added it along this edge before adding the back half of the pattern. Note that I decided to place the zipper on the side at one of the existing tabs rather than cut an extra somewhere else on the bodice. For the other side, I simply taped the pattern back together and cut it out, this time with the pattern on the right side. Note that the stripes make it so easy to find grain lines. Nice! And now it's time for assembly. I want to say a huge thank you to all of my contributors over on Ko-fi. Your continued support literally means I can continue making videos, and words cannot express how much I appreciate you. If you're enjoying this content and would like to help support this channel, I've linked to the page down below. I also post free bi-monthly blogs with project updates and behind the scenes photos, and I'm hoping to get more totally free content up there soon. Patterns, maybe? Every time I use it, I get asked, so this eyelet ruler is from Amped Atelier. I've linked it in the description below. As handy as lacing strips are, they still won't behave exactly as your sewn eyelets will, so before we can finish assembling anything, we need to get those made. Because this isn't a structured bodice, I could have made fewer eyelets spaced further apart. I wish I had, because it took ages. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Unless I'm making a mid-Victorian or later era corset, I will always opt to do hand-worked eyelets over grommets. I think they look prettier, they're cheaper, and much easier to do late at night when I'm watching TV. You try hammering grommets at 10 p.m. in an apartment and see how that works out for you. Now to tackle the center front boning. I'm opting to do only one piece of boning on either side of the center front seam. I'll add more later if I have to. Here's the final boning lineup. I decided to add boning to the tabs to give them a little more stability. The zipper will live on the left side of the bodice, but I'm going to baste it together first to test out my fit. This curved side seam is really tricky to get right. Take your time and pin, 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 or you'll be ripping and crying. Wait, Jackie, what are you doing? You're pinning that wrong. Hey, oh, uh-huh. There you go. That's what it's supposed to look like. And now, an immaturity break. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, gingham Batman! With that impulse out of the way, it meant it was time to join the fashion bodice to the bodice lining. The bodice back lining is going to be turned over and hand-stitched down to the anchored bodice back. This is my point of entry for future alterations if necessary. Match the straps and sandwich them around the bodice. When sewn, this will encase both seam allowances for a neater inside. All right, my friends, we're getting there. All right, so just a couple of minor things I need to tweak. Firstly, The bottom center front is kind of like cupping my problem area and I didn't like it. So I decided to cut up the center front on the seam line to make little extra tabs. It's laying much flatter now and I'm much happier with that. I'm getting a little bit of wrinkling here in the center front. I think I'm going to go ahead and just stick a center piece of boning just to smooth everything out. Once it's all together, a lot of that will go away, but just to be on the safe side. I've got my shoulder straps pinned where I want them to be. And quite by accident, I'm happy to announce that I've matched the patterns. It's the only place. I did that thing that I'm not supposed to do, the mistake that I made on my first Angelica gown. Because it's a one-way fabric and I cut it on the fold, half of my fabric is going in the opposite direction. Can't really tell, so that's good. I'm not gonna change it, but I'm happy that at least here I matched. All right, so I'm gonna make those couple of changes and then we're gonna go ahead and get this finished up. Oh yeah. I forgot. We still got to do the sleeves. Here's the center front boning. I'm going to run a third channel directly in the center. When pinning the tape down, take care to push the boning to the side and pin it securely. While I will of course take the boning out to sew the tape, this way I know how much space I have to keep on either side. Somehow I managed to do that on the first try. With that sorted, I could finally sew down the inside lining. Now we'll finish the neckline. Make sure you leave the seam allowance open on the strap. Stop! Zipper time! This is how much I like doing zippers. Invisible zippers are easier than the lapped kind. First, iron the coils out. Mark your seam allowances. Take the zipper and place it right sides together with the fabric on the right-hand side. Line up the coil against the seam line and pin it down. Use your trusty invisible zipper foot to sew it down. Now for the left side. Again, place right sides together and pin. If it feels awkward, you're probably doing it right. To finish it, move the zipper out of the way and stitch as close to your previous line as possible for at least 2 inches, or in my case, since the seam is so small, the rest of the way down. I'm glad that's over. Here's my initial sleeve layout. Is it right? I don't know. Should I do a mock-up? Probably. Am I just gonna cut it out of the fabric and hope it goes well? Yep. Okay, that stressed me out, so let's go ahead and trim this baby. And since I'm totally not stalling, let's go ahead and bind the tabs while we're at it. Here's my final sleeve layout. I decided I wanted to reserve as much of this fabric as possible, either for a shorter skirt or a cottagecore apron, TBD. Note, to do that, I made the executive decision to flip the undersleeve over so my pattern is not going to match. Puffy sleeves need a little extra support, so I cut strips of 2.5-inch muslin and reinforced each side of each piece, then gathered twice. The originals are cartridge pleated, but for the sake of time, we're just gonna gather these babies. Well, my friends, the sleeves are on. I got really frustrated with them last night and I ended up having to shut the camera off in order to get them done. Part of it is my fault because I took a piece of the pattern off. There is an actual piece of fabric between the arm side and the sleeve. This piece here. I didn't think it was necessary because I changed the complete neckline. However, this meant that all my markings were shot and, you know, sometimes Sometimes you just have to shut the camera off and get it done, right? I'm half a week behind on this project, which means I'm half a week behind on the real deal, which becomes an even bigger problem because making a pair of bodies in the historically adequate method takes a lot longer than this bodice. I made the decision to gather the sleeves instead of cartridge pleating because I thought it would be easier to set it through the machine. But the truth is, because the sleeves are so full, it almost looks like cartridge pleating anyway, and the sleeves are so dense that I was not gonna put it through the machine. I needed the control of the hand sewing. And for those of you who weren't around in December, I actually sewed through my finger on the machine and had the needle break inside of my finger. And I've been a little bit weird about sending thick things through the machine ever since then, as I'm sure you can understand. But the sleeves are on, the ribbon is on, we're just about done. All I have left to do is the modesty panel, which I am gonna use the camera for, so let's go ahead and get that done and call her finished. That's about it for me, folks. If you're interested in more budget-saving, history-bounding tricks for cute day looks, you can check out this video here on the screen. Thank you so much for watching. I love y'all, and I'll catch you in my next video.